The Sega Master System. It was the 8-bit predecessor to the Sega Genesis, and it was the direct competitor to the NES. Is it as good as the NES? Definitely not, but today we're talking about all of the co-op games for the Sega Master System, and we're gonna rank them from worst to best. Let's just start with the sports games. Let's just get that out of the way right off the bat. These are all the worst games, for sure. There's way too many tennis games. We got Wimbledon, Wimbledon 2, Tennis Ace, Super Tennis, and Andre Agassi. These are all 2-on-2 tennis games, and I think they're all pretty bad. None of them stand out to me. I'm not gonna pretend like one is better than the other. I think they're equally not fun to play. I hate sports. Moving on, Cyborg Z is a game that only came out in Korea. This comes across as a very low budget bootleg game that looks like it could have been on the ColecoVision. It's a vertical shoot 'em up that doesn't offer really much of anything. The graphics look outdated and the gameplay is nothing remarkable. But the worst part about this game is the terrible music. I don't know what this song is, some kind of old nursery rhyme, but it plays over and over and it sucks. Listen to this. So yeah, this is probably the worst co-op game on the system. Next we have Bruce Lee. This has the opposite problem. There's no music in this game for some reason, and somehow they managed to make all of the combat feel terrible and not fun. You have to hold over just to do a punch. You gotta push both buttons to do a drop kick, and you can do a super high jump, but only in certain areas to reach to a higher platform. You can't do it to jump up and over. It's only if you're jumping directly up. This just feels incredibly janky. The controls are terrible. This is unfortunate because the Bruce Lee game that came out on home computers earlier than this, on like Commodore 64 and MSX, is actually a good game. This is very different and it sucks. Columns. Now this is a classic puzzle game that's clearly came out as Sega's answer to Tetris. Is it as good as Tetris? No, it's not. But you know what? I actually grew up with Columns and I do have a lot of nostalgia for it. But the co-op gameplay is kind of lacking. You don't actually get to drop the columns simultaneously, you take turns. So player 1 will bring down their row and then player 2 controls the next row and you alternate back and forth. Honestly, this can be fun, but it just gets pretty repetitive. It's not very exciting. Super Space Invaders. Again, another game that doesn't have any music. I'm not sure what that's about, but you know what? If you like Space Invaders, you'll probably like this. There's nothing special about it. It's solid. It has the same classic Space Invaders gameplay. You can play it co-op. There's this part where these little cows, they get abducted by aliens and they start running around really fast, and you know, that's probably the best part about the game, honestly. The thing I don't like though, the visual style is gross looking. I hate the backgrounds. But you know what? It's just another decent version of Space Invaders. Nothing remarkable. Satellite 7 is a vertical shoot 'em up game that, again, doesn't offer anything new. I just felt like this is very, very generic. This one was released exclusively in Japan on the Sega card in 1985. Button 1 launches bombs at ground targets and button 2 shoots forward at airborne targets. It's not a bad game, it's just nothing terribly original. Rambo First Blood Part 2, or in Japan it was called Ashura, and then it was also called Secret Command for some reason in other regions. This plays basically just like Commando. It's a top-down vertical run and gun shooter, and it just runs pretty slow. You die very easily. I'm bad at this game. It's not the worst game. It's definitely not one of my favorite run and gun games. It just moves a little bit too slow for my taste. There's not enough power-ups. The basic gun is just not very interesting. The Sega Master System version of Rampage is actually pretty good. I think it's better than the NES version. Visually, it definitely stands out. It's definitely a step up, and it also includes Ralph. I'm not sure why Ralph was absent in the NES version, but other than that, this is just basic Rampage. And I do have a soft spot for this game. I definitely have a lot of nostalgia for it. I grew up with it. But ultimately, I find myself getting bored. After the first couple levels, you kind of get the gist of it, because nothing changes. You just keep destroying buildings. There's not any variety. I do really enjoy Rampage, but there are better arcade games and better co-op games. Miss Pacman. I actually just really love playing Miss Pacman in co-op. Obviously, one person is Pacman and the other is Miss Pacman. And you just work together to go through the maze, gather all of the dots, eat the ghosts. Why am I explaining Pacman? Everybody knows what Pacman is. If you don't know the gameplay for Pacman, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, this version you can play at co-op, and it's fun. Gauntlet is another port that doesn't really stand out against the other versions of the game. It's the same thing as the arcade version and the NES version. You pick your class, you got a wizard, elf, Valkyrie, and warrior, and then you go do some dungeon crawling. You fight hordes of monsters, and you die very quickly. Death comes and sucks your energy. If you don't have a potion, you die really quickly. Your health is constantly draining, which is a really terrible game design, which I just hate that about these old Gauntlet games, honestly. But other than that, yeah, it's Gauntlet. I like Gauntlet. I'm more of a fan of the 3D versions. Gauntlet Legends and Gauntlet Dark Legacy definitely took this original formula and improved upon it in just about every way. This version's only 2-player, unlike the NES version, so that's kind of unfortunate. Smash TV. Basics of Smash TV: you go into the rooms and you shoot hordes of enemies. Then you go on to the next room. You get power-ups, you gather points. I love Smash TV. This game works best as a twin-stick shooter, and with the Master System controller, you only have 2 buttons, so it's not ideal. At least with the NES version, you could do a makeshift twin-stick controller by using the 4-score adapter, and you can each hold 2 controllers. I thought that was really innovative, and there's not an option to do that on the Master System, as far as I know. But it is Smash TV, and I love it. So this is another decent version. Time Soldiers. So this is another top-down run-and-gun game. I really love the visuals here. It's really cartoony, has a nice anime art style, really colorful. The gameplay is pretty basic, not too different from the Rambo First Blood game, but I think the main thing that it has going for it is the environments are changing. Each level, you're going into a new time period. You start out in the prehistoric era, then you move on to other eras. I'm really bad at this game, but I've always enjoyed it. When I first got my Master System, this is one of the first games that I got, so I think it's pretty decent. Fantasy Zone: The Maze. This is like if Pacman also was a shooter, if that makes sense. You and a friend, you go through the maze, picking up all the dots and various items. You can get power-ups that you can purchase, and then you can shoot your enemies. And that's really what makes this game stand out, is just being able to gather up the power-ups and shoot the enemies. I am a very eloquent speaker. When I speak off the cuff, I say intelligent stuff. Battletoads and Battlemaniacs. This is a really interesting port because this was a Super Nintendo game that was ported to the Sega Master System. It was only released in Brazil though. I think it went under a lot of people's radar. It is interesting to see that this was the version of Battletoads that was ported and not the original Battletoads that was on NES. But man, this game looks great. This might be the best looking Sega Master System game. The backgrounds are really detailed, the characters look great, the enemies look great, it controls really great. Honestly, this is just an impressive port. I'm a big fan of this game. The only downside is there's an ungodly amount of flicker and slowdown. So obviously it's not as good as the Super Nintendo version, but it's just impressive to see this even existing on a Master System. So for that reason, I think it's worth trying out. Bobble. This is a game that I have so much nostalgia for. I of course grew up with the NES version though, but from what I can tell, this is basically exactly the same. I can't notice any difference in gameplay, really. The visuals aren't too different. It might be a little bit more colorful than the NES. Honestly, you can't go wrong with just about any version of Bobble. They're all solid. It's basic gameplay. I don't know how you can ruin it, but What I'm saying is this is another really excellent version of Bobble. But this version, it doesn't offer anything new, so that's unfortunate. I wish that it had some extra levels or something, but oh well. Galactic Protector. So this game only came out in Japan, and in order to play it properly, you have to have the Japan exclusive paddle controllers. I don't even own these, and they're very expensive, but luckily if you emulate this or play it on the Mister, there's a patch so you can actually play it with a controller instead of the paddle. So I haven't actually experienced it with the paddles. I think that would probably make it a lot more interesting, to be honest. As the gameplay is pretty basic, you just spin around the earth and you shoot all the enemies around you. As basic as it is though, I think that this is a really fun game, and the concept is unique enough in the world of shooters to make it stand out. But man, I wish I had the paddle controller. I really want to try that sometime. Maybe, I don't know. I was just looking, and those controllers are like $100 to $150, so I'm probably not gonna buy those anytime soon, but man. So Scramble Spirit is another vertical shoot 'em up. Again, this one doesn't offer anything new or innovative, but I do think it's quite a bit better than Satellite 7. Just visually, gameplay wise, it feels more interesting. This was a game that was made by Sega, and it originally came out in the arcades, and then it was ported to a number of home computers and as well as the Master System. But this is the version that I'm familiar with, and yeah, it's pretty solid. So Quartet is another arcade game created by Sega. The original version in arcades was 4-player. That's why it was called Quartet. So it is a little odd that they ported it to the Master System and kept that name. It should have been called Duet, I guess, because it's only 2-player. But that being said, this is a run and gun 2D platformer that's similar to Contra in a lot of ways, but way worse. The thing that makes this game stand out is that you can get jetpacks, and that's always fun. And the second player can jump on your head, and then you can fly around together. But this game has some elements that set it apart from other run and gun games from the era. Primarily that you have to get a key in order to get to the exit. This first level I absolutely hate, and it just starts off really hard. There's too much going on. But overall, I do really enjoy Quartet. Double Hawk is basically Sega's answer to Cabal. And again, it's not nearly as good as Cabal. There's no roll function, but it has the same cursor controls and gallery shooters type of gameplay. So you move left and right and you use the cursor to shoot and throw bombs. Visually, I do like it. The character sprites are pretty detailed. You can see those beautiful muscular backs on these men who belong in an 80s movie. But again, this is one of the Master System games that doesn't have any music. When playing an action game, it kind of ruins the mood a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. But that being said, Double Hawk is still worth playing. Game Ground is another Sega arcade game, and it was ported to the Sega Genesis as well, but the Master System version has unique levels. It's kind of its own thing. The object of this game is you have a number of characters and you got to navigate them to the exit, one by one. Make it over with your guy with the gun, then it will let you select your next guy. Like this guy that has a spear, or a wizard, or a ninja, and one by one you get them to the exit. It plays kind of like Gauntlet or a dungeon crawler, but with a little bit more strategy involved. The game does get a little bit repetitive, but overall, the gameplay is unique enough that it'll keep you entertained for a while, at least. Global Defense is a pretty unique horizontal shoot 'em up. I think this is a game that was meant to be played as a single player experience with 2 controllers, but obviously it's going to be better if you split the duties up with another player. One player controls the ship and the other controls the aiming and shooting. And I think this just makes for a really fun and unique co-op experience. To me, it makes Global Defense one of the best co-op games on the Master System. We need more games that have unique mechanics, and this one to me just stood out. The version of Double Dragon on the Master System I think is one of the best home versions. It's better than the NES version, simply because the NES version is only 1 player. Unacceptable. The game's called Double Dragon, not Single Dragon. Alright, there is a lot of flickering that happens, but if you can get over that, the game controls well, the graphics are really bright and colorful, And the soundtrack actually works really well on the Master System. To be honest, a lot of Master System games have pretty thin and sometimes shrill sounding music. I'm not always a fan of the music in Master System games, but they did a good job with the original Double Dragon soundtrack, transferring it over to the Master System. I feel like most people that grew up with Double Dragon, they probably played the arcade version or the NES version. Have you gone back and played the arcade version recently? It's actually terrible. There's so much slowdown. It's almost unplayable. If that was fixed, it would be great. But that makes this version on Master System even better than the arcade version. I said it. Yes, that's what I think. That is my hot take. I grew up with the Sega Genesis version, which is also a weird version. It actually moves faster in parts and then has bad slowdown, but I didn't know any difference. That was one of the first games I ever played as a kid. So my point being, Double Dragon is a mess. Every port is weird and has its flaws, but the version on Master System is one of the best, as far as I'm concerned. But my favorite co-op game on the Master System, it has to be Gangster Town. Simply because it was such a novelty to be able to play a 2-player co-op light gun game on an 8-bit home console. The NES didn't have any games like that. You weren't playing Duck Hunt with 2 light guns simultaneously. This felt like a real arcade experience in your home. And yeah, the gameplay is very simple, the visuals are pretty simple, the sound effects are simple, but it doesn't matter when you play a light gun game. All that matters is you have a friend next to you and you're both blasting away at these gangsters, doing whatever the hell they're doing. I don't know the story of this game, it doesn't matter. It's a light gun game and it's fun and it's 2-player co-op. All I can say is try this version, just try this out, okay? So as far as I know, those are all of the co-op Master System games, and I ranked them from worst to best. If there's anything that I missed, I'm sure you'll tell me about it in the comments. That's fine, please do. I did my best, okay? Let me know if you agree with this ranking. What's your favorite Sega Master System co-op game? And if you enjoyed this video, check out our video where we talked about the top 30 co-op NES games. Spoiler alert, those games are much better than anything on the Master System. Thank you for watching.